See, this is why, like, in my understanding that of the way that Arwen chooses to give up her immortality or whatever, I never thought that had anything to do with her half-elven heritage, and it always just had to do with her love of Aragorn, because she's following in Luthien's footsteps, and Luthien is not a human in any way, shape, or form. But also, Elladan and Elrohir, like, they are just as half-elven or elven as Arwen is, with them having the same parents. I can't talk today. But, like, them staying behind in Middle-earth doesn't mean that they're giving up their elven immortality. It just means that they're just not going to Valinor, and they choose to die in Middle-earth and give up their spirits to the halls of Mandos, like, eventually, but they're not interested in going back to Valinor. Like, at that point, it's not they're choosing to give up their elven immortality. It's more that they're not getting on the boat. That's literally all it means. If I remember correctly, Legolas doesn't even get on, like, the official boat to Valinor. If anything, if I remember correctly, Sam gets on the boat to Valinor after Rosie dies, and he passes everything on to his kids, and then he gets on the boat, and he's on the last boat, which means Legolas stayed behind. And when Legolas is ready to go to Valinor, he shows up with Gimli on, like, some little homemade skiff. Elrond is not half-elven. He didn't choose to give up his mortality. He stood in Middle-earth, like, after last call was rung by Valinor, so to speak, but he still got there, you know? And he's still an elf no matter where he is. Like, it doesn't matter whether he stayed in Middle-earth or whether he went to Valinor. He was always going to be an elf. And I think if Arwen had chosen to go to the Undying Lands, or if she had chosen to stay in Middle-earth without having fallen in love with Aragorn, I don't think that she was choosing either way in regards to her mortality, because she wouldn't have had any catalyst giving her the motivation to give up her immortality in the first place to be with Aragorn, because Aragorn wouldn't be a factor in her life. She would just be someone who stood behind in Middle-earth as an elf. And Elrodan and Elrohir, they don't even have, like, the skiff option. Like, they don't show up with their dwarf friends and ride up on a makeshift boat to Valinor. If I remember correctly, they just stay behind. And that's not them choosing to give up their immortality. It's just they stood behind. They like Middle-earth. They weren't ready to go back, and they didn't go back. And if I remember correctly, Thranduil doesn't either. I apologize in advance if I'm not pronouncing that name correctly, but I think that I am. But he doesn't go back either. Legolas goes back on his little homemade skiff with Gimli, but Thranduil stays behind. Thranduil is full elf whether he goes to Valinor or stays behind. But this, I think, has always been, like, where my confusion lied in regards to Arwen's status as a half-elf or whatever, because she operates in the world like an elf, and I don't think that she is in the same position as Elrond, where, like, she needed to choose, or her position in Valinor or falling in love with Aragorn would have had any bearing on her mortality in the first place. I think it was more that she is choosing a mortal life with Aragorn, knowing that she's only going to get one human lifetime with him, and then when he dies, she's going to waste away in grief. And for her, that was worth it. And I don't think it was her dying the way that Luthien died, because if I remember correctly, in the Lay of Luthien, it's like only Luthien as an elf has ever truly died, meaning that Arwen didn't, which means that Arwen, for all intents and purposes, is still an elf. So did their spirits find each other in the afterlife? I don't think we ever find out about that, which means that this is even more tragic and more sad. So pardon me, I gotta go cry now.